The 2025 Women's Euros is here. In preparation for the tournament, we're analysing every single nation. Now we're on to Denmark. As the Danes swap the gentle hills of their homeland for the harsher mountains of Switzerland, we preview their chances at this summer's tournament. We discuss their tactical philosophy and why there is hype and expectation around manager Andre Jeglerts. This is our Denmark Euros preview. Right, let's get into it then. Today we are on to Denmark. Denmark, one of the sides generating quite a bit of hype going into this tournament. Harry, talk to me about their history in the Euros.
They're a really mixed side, and as you say, they're building up hype this year, and I feel like what they've done in their history is they've either lived up to it and they've absolutely delivered, or they've completely crumbled. I mean, the last two tournaments are the best examples. In the group stage in 2022, everyone came into that tournament thinking Denmark could potentially be some dark horses and could look to cause a few of the big sides trouble. They were grouped, and it was in really disappointing fashion, and that was a massive letdown. But the tournament before that in 2017 was an absolutely brilliant one. Again, I think people expect them to do well. Did anyone expect them to reach the final? Absolutely not. They were superb in that tournament. Pernille Harder was absolutely phenomenal, and they were very unlucky that in that final they came up against an incredibly strong Netherlands side where Lieke Mertens just took that game by storm, and Denmark lost. But to reach the final in 2017 was absolutely incredible, and I think that they will. Again, does anyone think they're going to do that this year? No, but they're the type of side who can build runs like that. They can turn up at European tournaments and just deliver, and there'll be a lot of pressure, and I think there'll be a lot of ambition to go and better the disappointment that we saw 3 years ago, because Denmark are a side that we associate with getting out of the group stage and going deep and getting into those knockout games, and they're a side that really thrive on that kind of knockout football. They've got players that have been here for a very long time and have delivered. Pernille Harder is the sixth place or sixth all-time goal scorer in the Women's Euros, which is absolutely incredible. Just shows the consistent level she's been at, and she's still here. And that's the thing, when I look at the history that Denmark have and the fact that they've still got players who know what it takes to reach European finals, and they've got players who have the ability to send them deep in the tournament, I think that they look to be in a good position as a reason that people are excited about them. But yeah, I think that disappointment in the most recent tournament, but they're a side that history shows they can go deep, and they can look to cause any side in the world problems on their day.
Yeah, they're a side that have got quite a lot of history in this competition. Never won the Euros, unfortunately, but 13 editions of the tournament have included Denmark. Only one hasn't. So they've got a storied history in this competition, and I think they'll be looking at this season's edition, this year's edition, as an opportunity for them to go out there and make a statement again. I think they've been playing some really nice football coming into this. Let's talk qualifiers then, Harry. How did Denmark get here?
They did pretty well. They qualified second, so they qualified automatically from Group A2. That group was topped by Spain. What a shock. But Denmark did well. I thought that in the Spain games they didn't do terribly. They did okay. They didn't get completely played off the park.
They only lost 3-2 away from home, to be fair.
Yeah, that's pretty decent. That's to be honest, I think they'll be content with that because it shows they challenged.
And that was a 92nd minute winner and goals in the 74th and 77th.
That's what they do. So what Spain do best is they like to go 2 and down and then just pull it back in the last 15 minutes. But yeah, I thought Denmark fared well. They looked pretty comfortable against it was Belgium and Czechia in their group. They looked pretty comfortable against them. So I thought that they did well. Again, it was a qualification group, and when you look at it, we thought they'd go through, and they did so, and they looked pretty comfortable at it. They played some nice football, and they didn't have to faff around with playoffs or anything like that. So it was a really clean qualification campaign, only losing out to Spain. I don't think anyone is surprised by that, and I don't think they'll be too disappointed. I think the fact that they challenged Spain and they looked good, for me, they looked good in all 6 of their qualification games. So I think that was slightly promising to see.
Yeah, good in those qualifiers. Good then in the friendlies as well in the back half of last year. But some slightly worrying form in the Nations League. Losses in both games to Sweden with an aggregate score of 8-2 and a loss to Italy as well, 3-0 at home, all in the Nations League. Will there be some concern there for Denmark?
I think that on paper, when you look at it, losing to sides like Sweden and co isn't terrible, but it's the manner. I think that 6-1 loss to Sweden was, don't get me wrong, Sweden were brilliant. I thought Blackstenius was absolutely superb in that game, and overall across the board, Sweden were just absolutely class. But doesn't matter. No football club should ever lose 6-1 to a side of not similar quality, but competitive quality. So I think that'll be disappointing, and that'll be slightly worrying for Denmark. And yeah, they can't afford to do that. That was surprising to see, to be honest, because as you say, the qualifying form, the form, in 2024 was pretty decent. As we've got into the Nations League this year, it's slightly fallen away, which is probably the worst time for your form to start slipping away as we get closer and closer to the Euros. But they've got warm-up fixtures, and hopefully, for Denmark's sake, we'll be able to put that Sweden get lost down to just being an anomaly, and we wouldn't expect them to concede 6 to a side like Sweden, or to any side really. So they've got to put it behind them and just look to not forget about it, but learn what happened and don't let it happen again.
Well, they've got the match week 1, so they're going to have to learn very quickly how not to lose 6-1 to Sweden. That's going to be a really important fixture right at the start of the group stage. I think it's the reason a lot of people might write Denmark off, but looking at their group, they could get through.
Yeah, it's a very close group. It's a very tight group. I look at it and I think that on their day, any of these sides can be maybe not Poland, but I think between Germany, Sweden and Denmark, on their day, any of those sides can all beat each other. And that is going to make for a very, very interesting group. Again, it's another demonstration of this weird kind of development we've had where teams are playing each other in the Nations League and then meeting at the
every
Euros.
Group.
Yeah, every
There's
single
not
group.
a single group where we're looking at it and go, well, they've not. Every team's played each other in the last year.
Yeah.
For me, it's put a huge dampener on the tournament because we know how most of it's going to pan out. Based, I mean, there'll be surprises, of course, but there's very few teams now who haven't faced people in their group within the last 12 months.
Yeah.
And that's a real shame. And again, UEFA have to sort that out because it's lessened the quality, I think, or lessened the excitement slightly for some of the games of this Euros because we've seen them already. Don't get me wrong, the knockouts still going to be incredible, but there are group stage games I look at and I go, well, I can predict that because I've seen it 4 times in the case of Spain, Belgium.
Yeah, it's one of those where it is a frustration, and the only way the results are going to change is with a bit of Euros tournament magic. But I do think that Denmark are a side who can bring that kind of spirit and that kind of energy when we get to the major tournaments. They're the side who like to turn up and perform. And again, we're mentioning it, the likes of Pernille Harder on her game, and if she can deliver the way she has at tournaments of past, then they definitely won't be losing 6-1 to Sweden. And that's the kind of level they've got to be looking at, is that I think that Denmark are a side who can deliver when it matters most, and that will be the key thing for me.
Yeah, and they've still got Germany in their group, who they haven't played in 2 years. That's a very different Germany side. And they've still got Poland, who, as far as I can see, they've never played.
Yeah, potentially so. And I think, Poland, they're, again, Denmark, it's about focusing on what they can do and focusing on their strengths because, again, they've got the quality to beat all 3 sides in this group. Yes, Germany, maybe. I think Germany and Sweden are probably better on paper.
It's a stretch, but they can bridge that gap.
100%. And I think that if Denmark get it right, they've got the players, and I think that it will be very exciting for the country if they can deliver on the pedigree that we've already seen.
Right, let's talk tactics then. Now, there's a lot of hype about Denmark going into this tournament, a lot of talk about Jægerlert's tactics. So let's get into them. Let's talk about why they might be interesting, why they're a little bit different, and why there's a lot of hope Denmark could go quite deep into this tournament. So, starting off, in possession, it's going to be this 3-4-3 shape. Now, there's a few question marks around personnel. It's going to vary greatly depending on opponent. If they're playing a slightly weaker side, I think we'll see a more aggressive system. So what we could see is Thompson, this right winger, dropping into this right wing back role. And then we could see some different attackers coming in. So whether that's bringing in Signe Brun and dropping Vangsgaard into a wide area or something like that, we'll see them be a little bit more aggressive and add more attacking threat. So by having Thompson as this wing back, you're putting a winger into a defensive position because they're confident they're going to win. The other thing is that this midfield may look a little bit different. So they may drop Snell out and they'll bring in someone like Katarina Kuhl because that's going to give you a little bit more attacking prowess. So when they're expecting to win games, they are going to change the team to be a little bit more aggressive. But if it is going to be as strong as opposition, it's going to look with Thompson on this right wing and with Thorgerson in this wide right position. So it's going to be the 3-4-3 shape. Now, the thing I really like about this team, well, hang on, I should put Vangsgaard back in here. The thing I really like about this team is its ability to hold on to the ball. So, very possession dominant side. They're a side who had average 66% possession in their games. So, we're expecting Denmark to have a lot of the ball. Now, that's going to be really interesting to see how they match up against teams in their group, because you've got Sweden, who also like to have possession a fair amount, but are also quite good in counter-attacking. But you've also got in there Germany. Now, Germany are a very, very difficult side to beat, but they do thrive against sides who like to have possession because they like to play pressing football. But Denmark like playing teams who like to press because it means that they can then attack the space behind them. So I think that Denmark-Germany game is going to be a really interesting matchup. Let's look at the wing-backs then, because they're an interesting part of the side. So often they're going to push wide and they're going to push high and wide into these sorts of areas. The other thing that these wing-backs are going to do is come inside. And they're more than happy to let players like Thompson come out into these wide areas. And if they have, they'll drive inside and act as the interiors. So when you're looking at this sort of shape where you want to have this box midfield in possession for Denmark, they're happy for these wing-backs to drive inside. So that's a really interesting part of their play. They've got wing-backs who are happy to hold the width, as we've got with Sarah Holmgaard on this left side. But Thorgerson could drive inside if Thompson wants to hold the width. And they could do the same on this left-hand side. Harder holds the width, Holmgaard comes inside. So there's a lot of fluidity, a lot of flexibility in this front line, which is quite interesting. I think there's a lot of fun things that managers would be more scared to try, but Jeglerts is kind of brave. So that's fun to watch as well. Now, let's look attacking identity, because a lot of the time, sides are either very good at patient build-up play, patient possession-based football, or they like to play counter-attacking. But actually, Denmark are very good at both. So when they don't have possession, they're going to drop into this asymmetrical 5-3-2. Now, what I mean by that is we're going to see this sort of 5-back, and then we'll see this midfield pivot that we've already seen of Hasbo and Snurl. Now, so far it's looking quite normal. For most sides of the system, you'd expecting the wingers to drop into these positions. But actually what they do is only drop one of the two wingers, depending on which side the ball is. So if Harder wants to push up and onto these players, so the ball's on this left-hand side, they're going to drag players across rather than having Harder dropping here. They'll push her up. Now the same will go to the other side. So if the player's on this side, we'll see Thompson come in. We'll see Harder take up this sort of position, and we may even see Thorgerson as well pushing up a little bit more if they're not too aggressive, the opposition. So very interesting asymmetrical out of possession shape. It's fairly uncommon to see this sort of stuff at elite level football, but it's what Jeglerts like to do. It's something different and it's something exciting to watch. So I'm looking forward to see how this works at the Euros, whether it does work or whether it doesn't. But either way, it's going to be a really interesting tournament for Denmark's tactics. So some of the fun things, other things they do is with Pernille Harder. We know the quality that Pernille Harder has, and Jeglerts wants to get the most out of that. So oftentimes we'll see Harder giving a bit of a free roll, and she'll drop into this 10 position. Now, there's not really space for a 10 in this position, in this shape. With a 3-4-3, there's not really a 10 role, but Harder is given that license to drift into this sort of area, let the left wing back take that wide position. Harder will drop in, pick up the ball, and then can create from that sort of position. And Harder is a huge part of the creativity in this side. It allows them to play this Snurler-Hasbo pivot, which is slightly more defensive, and then use Harder as that creative player, that outlet, dropping into that 10 position to be the creative link. So really interesting to watch that as well. I think they've got a really nice combination of structure and fluidity. Oftentimes we see sides that are free-flowing attacking sides be too fluid, and actually then players get dragged out of position. Oftentimes we see sides that are too structured, and then it's boring and they can't really, it's easy to guess and predict what they're going to do. Denmark are a really nice mix of those two things. They're very fluid, they're very structured, and it's a bizarre thing, but it works, and it's really fun to watch. So I think Denmark are going to be really dangerous at this tournament. I think people will write them off because of the teams in their group. Germany and Sweden are both excellent sides, but they're a very good side in their own right, Denmark. I'm excited to watch them. Very good at counter-pressing, and this is interesting to watch as well. So when they're pushing up onto sides like so, they've got this front three, and that means that oftentimes, I mean, we've spoken already about how one player's going to drop off and then they can push up into a two. And this is really effective, winning the ball back in high areas. Now, one of Germany's weaknesses is that they give the ball away in high areas because of they struggle against sides that press effectively. So one big reason I think Denmark could do well in this group is they are matched up really nicely against their opponents. And again, because they've got that flexibility between fluidity and structure, they can change the way they want to play against different sides. So they're very interesting to watch. One thing they do have is defensive vulnerability, which comes naturally with fluidity. So when we look at their sort of shape where they've got wing backs bombing on and they've got this 3-5-3-2-5 shape, which is very common in attacking areas, they're not going to be the most strong at defending transitions. It is a relatively slow backline. I mean, we've got Catherine Weyer in here, who is slightly old now. I don't know if she's going to start the tournament. It's another one where we could see a base come in. She's not played a whole lot for Denmark, but she is an exciting player, so we might see her in this side. But I think it's going to be Weyer, Pedersen and Ferger. Other options in this side, you've got Olivia Holt. She's not really played enough this season at Tottenham for me to consider her as an option to start, but could be a player that makes a real impact. But overall, Denmark, very interesting to watch. What will be interesting now is, can they step it up? Can they match the likes of Germany and Sweden? And could they be the dark horses at this summer's tournament?
So let's get into predictions then. Looking at this group for Denmark, Sweden up first. Now, we just spoke about how they've already met Sweden in their most recent Nations League fixture, lost 6-1. How did Denmark as a side respond to that in the opening game?
It's a very difficult question. It's a very difficult thing to do. But again, you've got to just play it down. Think of it as an anomalous result. Don't think of it as, that's going to be that's going to happen every time you play them. Denmark didn't show their quality in that game. They were miles off it. And I think that if they can bring back that standard, if they can play to the best of their ability, they will make that a very interesting contest. And I think that that's the way they've got to look at it, is that starting the tournament with an opponent that you've just been smashed by is a very difficult situation to be in. But if they can adjust and they can react to it and they can, right their wrongs immediately, that could also be a good thing. Because if they did have someone like a Poland, they went and beat Poland, it would be that the thing that would loom over it would be, okay, we beat Poland, but when we play against good sides, we get smashed 6-1. They can get rid of that omen. They can get rid of that bad, thought immediately. If they go out, match week 1, they go and beat Sweden. Because then suddenly they're riding on a high. And I think that's the way they've got to look at it, is the Sweden game's the biggest one. Sweden game is the biggest one in the group, and it's the opener for Denmark. So it's about, between those two sides, the winner of that will be the side that gets going quickest and can get up to 110% across that 90 minutes, because that's a vital 3 points. If Denmark lose that, then suddenly the pressure's on to get a result against Germany, and that is a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah, no, this is the kind of group, though, where I think Sweden and Germany is quite interchangeable. People forget that, but Sweden are a very strong side, so it's going to be difficult for Denmark. But there's two ways to look at that first game. Firstly, it can't get worse. They can't possibly lose more than 6-1, surely. And you learn more from losses than you do from victories. Denmark and Jägler learned a lot more from that 6-1 loss to Sweden than Sweden would have. Sweden would have learned maybe Lena Hurtig could play a role in this tournament. Denmark have learned that probably don't play that way against Sweden. So they'll change, and it will all be about, can Sweden adapt to that? If Denmark get it right, it's very difficult for Sweden to adjust. A lot of managers don't have backup plans, especially when they're as stubborn as Peter Gerhardsen. So I think Sweden, really positive result coming into this tournament. But if Denmark can change what they were doing to be competitive, then they can put themselves in a position to beat Sweden. Germany match week 2 is going to be, I think that's going to be really difficult. I'm not really sure where Germany's level is at the moment, because they looked phenomenal in the last year, but they've also not really played anyone. So they could be brilliant. I think Denmark can bridge that gap and get a draw, but equally that could just be where quality reigns supreme and Germany win that game. And then obviously Poland at the end of the group, if Denmark don't win that, then there was no chance to begin with. So yeah, that's an important one. I think it's good placing. Poland at the end of the group, they would have preferred to start with Poland and kick their tournament off in good fashion. But if they've come away with a point from either of their opening 2 games, they could be in a position where, reliant on Germany or Sweden winning, they could get through with a victory. So it's a somewhat good position. Obviously, if they lose both those first 2 games, and so do Poland, then it's a game for no reason. But it could be a very important game.
Yeah, Denmark are in that bracket of side. We've mentioned a couple where they have the ability and they have the squad and the manager and the playing style to go unbeaten in these 3 games and top the group. They've also, if they don't play to their best ability, because of the quality in this group, they could be dumped out on 3 points. And it's a very difficult place to be. I think we mentioned it with a couple of sides in Group B as well, where from a fan's point of view, you look at this group and on one hand it could be incredible and you could go on, you could play brilliantly and take 9 points from it, or you could crash out in disappointing fashion and only manage to take points off Poland. So Denmark sit in that middle ground between Sweden and Germany and between Poland, where if they manage to play well, they'll move closer towards Sweden and Germany. If they don't play well, they're moving further towards Poland. And it's a very weird universe for Denmark to be in. But if they get it right, they're on the money. And that is the thing, is that if they get it right, suddenly they're into the quarterfinals. And they're one of those sides where over 90 minutes in knockout football, they can get the result against any side in the world.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting conundrum. I think I'd look at someone like a France or an England where there's that experience of knockout football and the pedigree on the field, and say they'd be the favourites. But yeah, I mean, Jeglich is a really decent coach, so I think it'd be interesting to see how he'd set up against one of those sides. I think, focus on the group stages, they get through. I would say quarterfinals is probably the furthest they're going to get at this tournament, but you never know. They could be the dark horse. Yeah. They could go even further. So we'll see. Either way, I think they're gonna give Sweden and Germany a good go in the groups. They should beat Poland. I think it's gonna be a very interesting group stage.
Yeah, they're a hard one to predict. They're a really hard one to predict because it could go either way. I think that, to be honest, I like watching Denmark. I think they're a nice team. I think their kit is the best at the tournament. I absolutely love it.
Even if they don't win the tournament, they've come away with that.
Exactly, and I think that's really nice, and it'd be great to see them get through. But my head would tell me that Sweden and Germany have got the quality to probably knock them out, which would be disappointing for Denmark, and it would mean that I wouldn't get to see as much of that kit. But I think that they'll give it a good go. It'll be close no matter what, but it's going to go right down to the wire.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, that does summarise everything for this preview. I hope you have enjoyed the video. Get involved in the comments down below and subscribe if you're new to the channel. If you want to watch more, well, we've been doing a lot of previews recently, so go out and check out the catalogue. We're halfway through, or over halfway through now, our Euros preview. So you've got Group A, Group B, and you've got Germany to go and check out. So there'll be one on screen now for you to go and watch. That, though, is everything. Thank you guys very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.